Santa Rosa City Schools just gutted its mild and moderate special education programs. The district increased class sizes. It laid off 270 employees over the last 13 months, and it closed 6 schools. Several of those closures were concentrated in lower income neighborhoods on the city's west side. The district made these cuts to avoid one thing: the state of California taking over its schools after years of structural fiscal pressure that was temporarily masked by one-time COVID funding. The question every Sonoma County parent should be asking is whether it was worth it, whether the price of staying out of state receivership was actually higher than the price of being in it, and whether the way Santa Rosa City Schools avoided receivership this round might have made the next round inevitable. California's record on those questions is more complicated than most coverage admits. I'm Robbie Dirth with Real Life Sonoma County. A year ago I covered the early stages of this story on YouTube. I'll link that piece in the description. If you watched it then, you may have been waiting for this update. If you didn't, the original gives you the foundation, but you don't need it to follow along here. Today is about where we actually are now and the questions I think every parent in this county should be sitting with. This piece is also the first cornerstone in a new chapter for Real Life Sonoma County. Real Life Sonoma County is now an independent local journalism publication built specifically to follow stories like this one over time. The work I started a year ago continues here under the new brand, with a clearer editorial standard, a real newsletter, and a model that makes coverage like this free to everyone forever. No paywalls, no clickbait, just the information that you should know, broken down in a format that you can better understand. This story is complex and getting covered in lots of ways. My job is to bring the angle no one else is covering: the data, the mechanism, the questions that actually matter for parents, teachers, and the future of the district. For more on this, subscribe and follow. To be part of the conversation, drop a comment below telling me what you're most worried about and what you want me to look into next. I read every comment. I'll be covering this story on an ongoing basis for the parents and community members of Sonoma County Schools. So let's start with how California actually decides when a school district is in trouble. I touched on AB 1200 at a high level in last year's piece, but we're going to get into more detail here. The past 12 months of Santa Rosa City Schools history is really only intelligible through this framework. Every school district in California has to file what's called an interim financial report twice a year, on December 15th and March 17th. Those reports go to the County Office of Education. In our case, that's the Sonoma County Office of Education, run by Dr. Amy Carter. Each report gets one of 3 labels. Positive means the district will meet its financial obligations for the current year and the next 2. Qualified means it might not. Negative means it won't. Negative is the most serious flag a district can give itself. Santa Rosa City Schools filed a negative certification on December 10th of last year, 2025. That was the first negative certification in district history. Once a district lands on qualified or negative, the county office can intervene in increasingly serious ways. First, they can require a fiscal recovery plan. Then, they can assign a fiscal advisor to monitor the district. Then, they can grant that advisor something called stay and rescind authority. That's the power to pause or reverse decisions the elected board makes. If a district still can't fix its finances, the next step is the only step that actually strips the elected board of power: a state emergency loan authorized by the California legislature. The moment that loan is signed, the state superintendent of public instruction removes the local superintendent. The elected school board becomes advisory. A state-appointed administrator takes over all the legal powers of the board. Local democratic control of the schools is suspended until the loan is fully repaid. And the loan isn't always voluntary. A district can be forced into it the moment it can't make payroll or pay its bills. At that point, the state has to step in because teachers and contractors and obligations all have to be paid. The emergency loan is the only mechanism that delivers cash fast enough, so once a district requests it, or the state determines the district can no longer function without it, the takeover provisions trigger automatically. This is why the cash position is the metric to watch. The board can choose how deep to cut, the board cannot choose whether to make payroll. Only 9 California districts have ever taken that loan under the current law, which has been in place for 35 years. Oakland was one, Vallejo was one, Inglewood is still under state administration 13 years in. The loan is the point of no return. I covered the run-up to where we are now in the April 2025 piece. The 311 closure plan, the shift to the 7 through 12 campus model, the Daisy Morales hiring decision after her vote of no confidence history at Live Oak, the first wave of layoffs, the first wave of closures, including Albert Biella and Brook Hill, the original 97% no confidence vote against Morales. Full context is in last year's video, once again linked in the description. Here, I want to focus on what's actually happened since. The biggest move came right after my April piece dropped. Morales was ousted as superintendent 10 months into her tenure. The board installed Lisa August as interim. She is still in that role today, with the board interviewing candidates for the permanent position as I record this. The closure scope kept expanding. In addition to Albert Biella and Brook Hill that I covered last year, Herbert Slater and Santa Rosa Middle School were closed by the end of 2024-2025 school year. Comstock Middle and Steel Lane Elementary are closing at the end of this current school year, June 2026. That's 6 total closures. Then last fall, the situation escalated to a level my April piece couldn't anticipate. On September 25th, 2025, Amy Carter, the Sonoma County Superintendent of Schools, made an unusually direct public statement, saying Santa Rosa City Schools was at, quote, dire risk of state takeover. County superintendents do not make those statements lightly. It was the moment the crisis became publicly visible at a new level. On December 10, 2025, Santa Rosa City Schools filed a negative certification for the 2025-26 first interim, first negative certification in district history. One day earlier, Rincon Valley Unified filed its own negative certification. On January 15, 2026, SCO assigned a fiscal advisor to the district with stay and rescind authority, the power to pause or reverse board decisions that worsen the budget. The Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistant Team, or FCMAT, is California's fiscal SWAT squad for districts in trouble. Based at the Kern County Office of Education, its job is to evaluate the situation and either help a district recover or document the case for state intervention. On January 28, 2026, the head of the FCMAT told the Santa Rosa City Schools Board, quote, "You have some serious cash issues, far more serious than any other district in the state." On February 11th, 2026, the board approved another roughly 100 layoffs. On March 11th, 2026, after all of that, the board adopted a positive second interim certification. The district had seemingly climbed back from the brink, but with heavy costs. On April 17th, 2026, SCO accepted that positive certification with what they called grave concerns. They warned that out-year enrollment assumptions might be overstated. If those assumptions miss, Santa Rosa City Schools is back to negative inside of 12 months. On April 23, 2026, the teachers union held 3 more no-confidence votes, this time targeting Interim Superintendent August, Board President Caston, and County Superintendent Carter. All 3 passed near unanimously. That's the year in review. The cumulative cost of getting from December's negative certification to March's positive certification is roughly 270 layoffs across the recent rounds, 6 campus closures, mild and moderate special education cut, larger class sizes, and support students for students and teachers decimated. But in the name of fairness, here's what the administration would want emphasized. California funds districts through what's called the Local Control Funding Formula, the LCFF. Schools get roughly $10,000 to $15,000 per student per year, depending on the grade level and student demographics. When enrollment drops by 25% over a decade, revenue drops by roughly the same. The math is unforgiving. A district designed for 16,000 kids is asked to operate at the cost structure of one serving 12,000. Some cuts were genuinely unavoidable. The question isn't whether to cut, it's how much, how fast, and which programs absorb the impact. The administration's case is that the board has been making the hardest possible decisions with the information available, and that doing it under elected leadership with community input is better than waiting for a state administrator to impose the same cuts without local consent. That case deserves to be taken seriously, and I should also note that almost all of the people trying to fix these problems are not necessarily the ones who helped create them. One more thing happening behind the scenes that ties into all of this. The board has been conducting a search for a permanent superintendent since November 2025. Per recently posted board meeting minutes, the board has now chosen a single finalist for contract negotiation. That vote was 6-1 with Trustee Sarah Jenkins as the lone dissent. Trustee Jenkins has consistently asked the hard questions on enrollment and operational due diligence in board meetings. Her dissent is worth paying attention to. This process has been remarkably closed. The finalist's name has not been made public, disclosed by the board, the search firm, or the Press Democrat. The community will likely meet their next superintendent only after the contract is signed. I'll be covering this hire in depth, likely as the next piece in this series. Who the finalist is, what their background looks like, how the compensation compares to layoffs being approved at the same meetings, and whether the board is about to repeat the mistakes that led to the Daisy Morales situation I covered a year ago. Subscribe and follow so you don't miss it. Now we get to what I want to call the question of the year. A year ago in my April piece, I made a prediction. I'm going to play you exactly what I said. It's a compounding one. The more families that leave, the less funding the district receives. The fewer resources schools have, the harder it is to retain staff and students. It's an exponential decline, and one that almost certainly ends with state takeover if nothing changes. The district had supportive parents and educators for a time, but now the support is hanging on by a thread. That framing wasn't original to me. The basic logic of a per-pupil funding system makes that dynamic foreseeable to anyone paying attention. My crystal ball was in the shop that day, but the point I made in April is the same point SCO is now officially acknowledging in their grave concerns language about overstated enrollment assumptions. The cuts to avoid state takeover can themselves accelerate the conditions that lead to state takeover. And here's why the district's enrollment assumptions could miss. The cuts Santa Rosa City Schools made to climb back from negative are themselves the kind of cuts that drive enrollment loss. Mild and moderate special education gutted, larger class sizes, school closures concentrated in particular neighborhoods, reduced support services. These are the things that make families with options reconsider whether their kids' education would be better elsewhere. Some of those families are already leaving. Full disclosure, my own family is moving to a neighboring district next school year. The move comes at a substantial cost to our lifestyle, but I believe my kids' education is worth it. Am I making the right call? I honestly don't know. What I do know is that I'm not happy with how the district has handled this situation from day one. That means that yes, I'm likely reporting this story with a bias, that of a concerned parent who has seen the toll this has taken on the teachers, the staff, and the students. And you should weigh what I say with that in mind. I'm doing my best to give every position its strongest case throughout. My family is just one example of what I'm about to describe. There's a second flow worth understanding. Santa Rosa City Schools is a unified district covering both elementary and high school within its boundaries. Its high school portion also draws students from feeder elementary districts across the area. Rincon Valley Union is one of them. Bellevue Union, Mark West Union, Pioneer Olivet, Bennett Valley, and others feed into Santa Rosa's high school district. When those feeder district parents look at what's happening inside Santa Rosa City Schools, they make decisions about whether their kids will eventually end up at a Santa Rosa high school that just cut classroom support, or whether they'll find another path. Charter, private, move districts before middle school. Whatever it takes. Call it the secondary exodus. The cuts that were supposed to stabilize Santa Rosa City Schools' budget caused two compounding flows of enrollment loss. Families inside Santa Rosa City Schools leaving for neighboring districts with their kids, and families in feeder districts redirecting away from Santa Rosa City Schools before their kids reach high school. Both flows are responses to the same set of cuts. Both flows make the next round of enrollment loss worse than the assumptions in the district's recovery plan. But in the name of fairness, here's the strongest counter to this theory. The enrollment decline preceded the cuts by many years. The drivers I just named and others, housing costs, declining birth rates, post-wildfire dislocation, charter migration, these all operate regardless of district policy. The cuts are a response to those forces, not the cause of them. From this view, the secondary exodus framing is intuitive but oversold. Families with means have always been making these calculations. The cuts don't really change the trajectory. If anything, demonstrating fiscal discipline reassures fence-sitting families that the district is being responsibly managed. In this case, I find that counter less persuasive than the doom loop. But it's a serious argument, and I want you to hear it clearly, and it would be irresponsible for me not to show the other side. What this dynamic represents beyond the data points is parents making decisions that the district has not visibly taken serious enough. The parents organizing against school closures, the teachers voting no confidence twice in 13 months, the families looking quietly at neighboring districts. These are the people most affected by what's happening. And from what I can read in board minutes, public statements, and the district's own recovery plan, their concerns about long-term programmatic damage have not been treated with the same weight as the goals of avoiding state administration and stabilizing the budget on paper. It feels like the calculation has been, any cuts are acceptable if they avoid receivership. The question I'd ask is whether that's actually the right calculation for the district's long-term health, or whether other considerations have been weighed more heavily than they should. If the doom loop is what's happening, the question facing Santa Rosa City Schools isn't how do we recover from this round, it's how do we keep this round from making the next round inevitable. And the answer to that question is not visible in any public document the district has produced. Here's what most coverage isn't connecting. California has nearly 1,000 school districts. The state's previous interim reporting cycle, filed in December 2025, showed only 8 districts statewide in negative certification. 3 of those 8 were right here in Sonoma County. Santa Rosa City's Elementary, Santa Rosa City's High School, and Rincon Valley Union. Add in the qualified list for that same December cycle, and 6 Sonoma County districts were flagged for fiscal danger by the state. That was more than any other county in California. Sonoma County has about 1.2% of California's population, about 4% of California's school districts, and in December, nearly 40% of California's most fiscally distressed districts. The state has now posted the second interim cycle, filed in April. Only one Sonoma County district appears on the flagged list for now: Cotati Runner Park. Santa Rosa City Schools, Rincon Valley Union, and the others have either climbed back to positive or moved off the qualified list. That looks like recovery on paper. The question is whether it's actually a recovery or a temporary paperwork win that will revert when the next round of enrollment data comes in. Something is happening in this county that isn't happening anywhere else in the state at this scale. Wildfire dislocation, housing affordability, an aging population, a service economy that pays workers wages that they can't raise families on. The forces hitting Santa Rosa City Schools aren't unique to Santa Rosa City Schools. They're hitting our entire county at once. That's a bigger story than just one district, and I'll be covering it throughout this series. Here's the question I think we should be asking now. Santa Rosa City Schools gutted its mild and moderate special education program. It increased class sizes. It laid off 270 people. It closed 6 schools. It did all of that to avoid state takeover. Most coverage assumes that was the right trade. Avoid receivership. The cuts are the lesser evil. I'm not so sure. And the secondary exodus dynamic I just described is part of why. State takeover, when it happens, comes with money. Oakland got $100 million when they took the state loan in 2003. Vallejo got $60 million. That money lets a district avoid the cliff edge cuts. It spreads the pain over years instead of pancaking it into one budget cycle. State administrators can do things an elected board can't. They can close more schools faster. They can restructure contracts. They can make decisions without absorbing the political damage that cripples elected officials. But state administration costs democracy. Oakland lost local control for 22 years, Vallejo for 21. Inglewood is still under state administration after 13 years. That's the strongest case for what Santa Rosa City Schools did, and it deserves serious weight. 20 years of lost local democracy is generational damage. Oakland emerged from receivership in 2025 directly into a $30 million deficit, suggesting state administration didn't actually solve the underlying problems. It just managed them while suspending local control. Vallejo and West Contra Costa appear on California's 2025-26 qualified list, meaning post-receivership districts can slip back into trouble anyway. From this view, whatever the price of avoiding receivership, the price of being in it is worse. The cuts Santa Rosa City Schools made are real and painful, but they are assumed to be recoverable. 20 years of lost local control is not recoverable in any meaningful sense. The board, on this view, is doing what the historical record says is the right call. Here's what makes the comparison sharper. The cuts Santa Rosa City Schools already made are the same kind of cuts a state administrator would impose. Closures, layoffs, class size increases, support service reductions. The difference isn't whether the cuts happen, the difference is whether the elected board absorbs the political damage of making them, and whether the cuts drive enough secondary enrollment loss to trigger the next negative certification anyway. The latter is the question I keep coming back to. The question I think parents and teachers across Santa Rosa should be wrestling with isn't simply whether to avoid state takeover, it's 2 harder questions. First, did the way Santa Rosa City Schools avoided takeover this round make the next round inevitable? Second, if receivership is going to happen eventually anyway, is it better to take it now with $100 million in state stabilization money, or to keep cutting until there's no district left to take over? I don't know the answer to those questions. I don't think that the district has publicly addressed either of them. And the more parents I talk to who are quietly making the same calculation my own family is making, the more I think those questions deserve a real public conversation in Sonoma County. These loans aren't free money. They carry interest at the state's investment portfolio rate, which has historically been low but is currently running around 4 to 4.5%. Oakland's repayment of $119 million on a $100 million loan reflects the very low interest era of the 2010s. A 2026 loan would likely cost Santa Rosa City Schools meaningfully more in interest over its life. And if you've stayed with me this long, that's the foundation of this series. In the coming weeks, I'll be going deeper. I'll look at what Oakland and Vallejo actually experienced under state administration. I'll get into the specific cuts at Santa Rosa City Schools, especially special education. I'll cover the other Sonoma County districts on the danger list and what's driving the concentration. But the direction of this series is going to be shaped by you. Drop a comment below and tell me what you're most worried about, what you want explained, what questions your school community is asking that aren't getting answered. I read every comment. I'll be covering this story on an ongoing basis. If this is the kind of journalism you've been looking for in Sonoma County, subscribe at the link in the description. Free to everyone and supported by readers who choose to fund the work. And with that being said, if you would like to support the work, either one time or ongoing, thank you so much. I'd love to bring more of this to you. That opportunity to support is on my website, along with a detailed blog post with a link to my sources, my editorial standards, and more. The link to my website is in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the comments. Send this to someone who might be interested, and don't forget to follow along for more Real Life Sonoma County.